So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in this session. Here today we have Yahya from Egypt to talk about SolidWorks animation. So before we start, I just want to thank the SolidWorks User Group Network for sponsoring these events as always. If anyone wants to sponsor in the future, you can always reach out to me through the meetup group. And today I'm very excited to have Yahya to talk about SolidWorks animations going from zero to hero. So as an introduction, Yahya, can you just share a little bit about what's the intent of this presentation?
Yeah, sure. So the thing is, SolidWorks animations are the kind of thing that you don't actually find out that you need them unless you really do need them. And by that, it's kind of late to start learning them. So it doesn't take that much to come up with an eye-catching animation. And this is the whole reason behind this presentation, how to take like small tweaks to your already existing workflow and start making a good animation that like is worthy of you or 3D designer like you.
Awesome, perfect. So I'm super excited about this one. So because I myself, I have very little experience on animations. This is one of the topics that I really wanted to learn for myself. So just as an experiment, I wanted to kick off a poll. Yeah, I'm gonna kick off a poll to see if what's the level of engagement for everyone. So just let me know, did the poll pop in your screens? Okay, seems like it did work. So we're just gonna give a little bit of time to have people answer these questions. Wow, okay, so far we have mostly beginners, few proficients, and I would say I've never done this one. So yeah, so we have a very good mix of beginners to a little bit proficient. So I think this presentation is gonna really have really be perfect for developing these animation skills to take you from like very basic level understanding to a great animation. So with that, I'm gonna invite you, Yahya, to share your screen and you can take it from here.
Okay. So as we started a moment ago, when Steffi said this is going to be from zero to hero. So the whole goal today is to start talking about animations from the very beginner level and then start raising the bar one by one. And just for starters, like a quick intro to who I am, because why the heck are you here talking about animations? I've been using animations for quite a while, a couple of years right now in SolidWorks, and just forget about the things that you see on the slide. This is just bragging rights, right? But the main thing is having your animations seen is the whole goal. And this is what we're going to talk about today, which is we're going to start about why should we even use motion studies and why are they important. And then we're going to talking about the different types of them that are on SolidWorks, because in case you haven't noticed, there are multiple types, and some people might find it confusing which type should they use with the case they are using it. And then we're going to talk about different techniques in each type, and we're going to delve in a bit more in depth for every technique. And at the very end, we're going to share some tips and tricks for exporting your animations at the very end. So without further ado, let's start with why use motion studies. And the first thing that just comes to my mind is that because they're eye-catching. Because let's just think of this. When was the last time you were scrolling on Facebook or LinkedIn and you came in front of something that just made you stop? That's what animations does, because we can all share files with each other. We can all share rendering with each other. But animations, they have like a different flavor, right? And the other thing is, because since there are animations, they involve motion. So for example, if I show you this on the screen, you might not know what kind of model mechanism that is. But as soon as I start animating it, you are, yeah, you know, yeah, this is like turning rotary motion into reciprocal motion or whatever it does, but it starts conveying a different message. It shows you something that you weren't able to see before. And the main thing, or the last thing I'm going to finish with, is that it allows you to see different angles of your model, see it from different perspectives. So from one side, it might say something, from another side, it might say something else. All of these things you can do with animations, not only animations, but I'm talking about any type of motion study inside of SolidWorks. And there's another fourth thing, which is just to have fun. I mean, let's look at this video real quick. This was me scrolling on Facebook when I came across the word SolidWorks, so I just zoomed in. And you might think, yeah, I can do this with Camtasia or with Adobe After Effects or Premiere, but actually this was done inside of SolidWorks. So it was all made inside of SolidWorks. I took a screenshot, put it on a model, and then started animating it. I mean, obviously you're not gonna use SolidWorks or something like that, but I'm just showing you the capabilities of what the software allows you to do. So enough of that, let's start talking about the first thing that we have today, which is the easiest way of making an animation in SolidWorks. And I'm using the word animation here loosely because the general term is motion study, all right? And that's like the umbrella term. And under that, there are different types of motion studies. There are animations and basic motion. And there's a third type, which is motion analysis, which is a bit like simulation, but that's only for those who have SolidWorks Premium. So it doesn't come with standard or professional. So we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to focus about animation and basic motion. All right. And the main differences between both of them are actually how you intend to animate the model. So when I'm talking about animation, it's either based on something called key points, which I'm going to talk about a bit more in depth in a moment. And the key points, they like transfer from one key point to another, or like transition from one key point to another through some process called interpolation. All right, and we're going to come back to that point in a moment. And the other type of way to define an animation is using motors. So you start specifying certain parameters like speed and direction, that kind of stuff, and then the software calculates that for you. As for basic motion, it's like a stripped down version of motion analysis. So it's more based on physical stuff. So we've got contacts, you've got gravity, that kind of stuff. And it's not that high level like motion analysis or simulation. So it doesn't actually take that much time to compute. It calculates pretty quickly. But on the other hand, you don't get pretty precise results. You get like you get what you get for the time it calculates in, and we're going to see how quick it calculates while we're going through this session today. So the main thing here that I want to tell you is what you have is your model, and now you have to decide which type of motion study I'm going to use, and that's based on the info you have about how the animation is going to look like. So usually in animation, you already know everything about the animation. You are the one who is moving everything around. So you already know the inputs and the outputs. All the software is doing is just making that change for you, or making that interpolation or transition for you. On the other hand, for basic motion, you define physics, you define the environment for the model, and then you let software to calculate that for you. All right, so let's talk about interpolation, because that might be a new term for most of you. So let's say I've got these like cubes on the left, and this is like one state, and the other state is that I want to get them all on the right. Those two states, since there's a difference between them, we call these key points. So we can say that one key point is where everything is on the right, and the other key point is where everything is on the left. All right, and the transition from the left to the right and so on, that transition which the software calculates for you, that's what we call interpolation. And interpolation comes in like different flavors, right? There are 5 different types, and their names are actually pretty straightforward. So when we talk about linear interpolation, it just goes in a straight line. There is no curve. All right. For snapping, we're talking about it doesn't change until the very last moment. The other 3 options, ease in, ease out, and ease in and ease out, they take more of a curve or like a slope to them. So as you can see over here, snap, it doesn't move. Linear, it goes with a constant speed. Ease in like goes very quickly at the beginning and very slowly at the end. Ease out at the opposite, and then ease in, ease out, it does the difference. It does like a very slow beginning, speeds up, and then a very slow ending. So these are all different types of interpolation for the same transition, for the same two key points that we're talking about. And building these up one by one, that's what defines the animation you've got. And don't be alarmed. These are all different techniques, but usually you're not going to use all of that inside of your animation. So first, as I said, we've got key points. And when it comes to key points, the easiest type of animation is to just drag stuff around, right? And when we start taking it one step higher, we start looking at mates, using mates that we already have inside of assemblies to animate our models. So let's take a look at that. So what we're trying to create right now is an animation of a neat trick that I saw before. I'm not sure if any one of you have seen this before. It was like a trick where you've got like a chocolate and you start chopping it around in specific ways, and then magically somehow you end up with one extra piece of the chocolate. And what I did is that I modeled it on this on SolidWorks, and then I drew this white outline to show that the small piece of chocolate that you actually take, it's actually like it's actually not that magical. You actually do get less chocolate at the very end, but it's evenly distributed along the chocolate that you don't see it. So let's say I've got the model over here, and let's head into SolidWorks to create it. So the first thing, I'm going to create a new motion study. All right. And this here, the motion manager, this is where you create your animation. So you've got here your timeline, which is in seconds, of course. You've got here some tools to move along the timeline. And on the right here, sorry, on the left, you've got like a stripped down version of your feature tree. So instead of this one, you've got this one, which you're dealing with. And here it's got the things that you need inside of your animation. So you've got the components, you've got the mates, stuff like that. And we're gonna start moving one by one. So we said that the easiest way is basic dragging. So what I'm gonna do is, let's say, let me just zoom in a bit over here. And then let's say after 1 second, so I'm just gonna stop at 1 second, I want this to move down. So I'm just gonna hold it and drag it down. And as soon as I release my mouse, you see that I've got this rhombus over here. This is the key point. Okay, so this indicates that there was a change. As you saw, there was the change. It has a different position now from the beginning. And this green thing over here, that's a change bar, which indicates that here there is a change between one key point to another. Because let's say I got this key point, I hit copy, and after some time I hit paste. There is no change bar here because they are the same key point. There is no difference between them. So the change bar indicates that there is difference between the key points you're using, and it does actually come in handy, and we're going to talk about that as we go through. Anyways, we've got the first movement we've got. Now let's say I want this to move sideways. So let's stop at 2 seconds and drag it to the side like this. And I've got another key point, as you can see. And I also want this one to move a bit to the side. So let's grab this one and drag it to the side. All right. And I've also got a key point for that. And at the very end, let's say at 3 seconds, I want to drag this one all the way down over here. Let me just try to align it with my mouse, something like that. Perfect. All I have to do now is just hide this piece that I want to be hidden. So I'm going to step over here and this delete me. I'm just going to right click and hide. And it's going to hide for me. So it's pretty simple, right? But the thing is, let me just play this real quick from the very beginning. It does kind of look okay, but if I zoom in a bit, let me just look over here. Since I'm using my mouse to drag things around, I don't really have that much control over precision. So you've got a small gap over here, and it actually took me a couple of trials to get it all right and stuff. So instead of doing this, how about this? Let me just go back again and create a new motion study. But this time I'm going to use mates. All right. So I already set up this model with a couple of mates down here. So I've got these limit distance mates. And that's actually all I need. All I have to do is just, let's do the same thing, actually, even the same duration. So at 1 second over here, all I have to do is just right click on this and change its value, right? So if I open it, I've got this distance value. I'm just going to double click on it. And all I have to do is just change the dimension. right? So let's take it all the way to the end. I hit OK. And I can also get a similar key point, which also is going to give me another change bar. But this time it's blue. You notice the difference in colors. Difference in colors, it corresponds to different things. So whether you're changing the position by hand, it's green. If you're changing mates, it's blue, and so on. Different colors represent different things. And I can just keep going on and on. So after 2 seconds, I want to change the other one. And right now, I don't even have to wonder whether I dragged it enough or not. All I have to do is just enter a numeric value, which is way more precise than anything I was going to do using dragging with my hand. And one by one, I can keep doing this over and over. And here, as you can see, it's going to move vertically from 1 second to over here. But when it comes to moving horizontally, it actually changes throughout the whole 2 seconds. And I actually don't want that. And here comes the use of key points. I can simply just take this key point and drag it over here. So here I don't have a change bar, here I do. So what the software is going to do is from here to here, it's just going to change the first thing. And from here to here, it's going to do the second one. And just like that, I can start changing when each change that I've set to the software happens. So for example, I might want, while this is moving from side to side, let's hide the component over at the top. So here it is. Let me just hide it real quick. And now it's going to be hidden from the very beginning to over here. So maybe I just also want it to be hidden only after 1 second and so on. And just like that, I can keep going on and adding different dimensions and changing different values just to start animating my model. So let me just use this one as a last example and jump right into the next one. Okay, and the same thing, I don't want it to start moving from the very beginning. All I have to do is just drag this around over here. And now it's going to start moving at the second mark and so on. Now I want this piece to get back over here. And actually, this is a really neat way to use copy and paste. So I can get this one, copy it and paste it over here. And since I also don't want it to change all throughout that distance, all I can do is just get this one, copy it and paste it, let's say over here. So between these two, since these two are the same key point, there is no change, and the change only happens at the very end. But I noticed that this value is actually not correct. So instead of having to do this with my mouse, all I have to do is just change this numerically, as I said. So it's a dimension. And just like that, I've finished it. And I'm sure that everything here is just as I want it. If I hit play to from the very beginning, it's going to move exactly as I want it to move. Okay, so just like that, I now have a precise control of my model. Someone might say, yeah, but I can also do that with a bit less precision with my mouse. You're not considering changes that might happen to your model. So let's say if I change this dimensions, for example, of this model, if I scale it up or scale it down, I don't have to re-drag everything else from the very beginning. No, I already have some values that can be easily linked to each other, and I can change stuff on the go. So that's the simplest way to create an animation inside of SolidWorks. So keeping on, moving on with using key points, we can now not only animate movement of components, like changing their position or orientation, we can also, as we said before, we can change the views, and that can easily be done using cameras. So let's take a look at this. You remember that dual word that I showed you earlier in the presentation, where from one side said Yahya and from the other side said Khder. So let's animate this one. All I have to do right now is just create a camera. So I already have that one created. So if you come over here to your scenes, lights and cameras, you've got this folder for cameras. You can right click and add a camera, or in my case, I already have a camera created. So let me just create a new camera just for the sake of showing you a couple of things about cameras. So as soon as you create a new camera, your view gets split into two. This one on the right is what the camera is seeing, and this one on the left is your model view, right? So from over here, you notice that here's the camera, here's the model, and you've got these 2 points. This one is red and this one is yellow. This yellow one over here, this indicates where the camera is. So when I start moving this around, it starts changing where the camera is, but it's still looking at the exact same point. On the other hand, changing this red one over here, it changes where the camera is looking at. All right, and since I love using numeric control over everything, I can come over here and activate show numeric control, and just like that, I can start enter numeric values for the positions of everything. So let's say I want this to be like that. I can start changing the camera position as well. I've got, for example, the angle it's looking at, maybe something like this, maybe a bit down, maybe like that. I can even change the perspective and toggle it on and off if I want to. And let's say, for example, I want it to be like a wide angle. I can change the camera lens. Maybe I want it to be a bit telephoto, so it's zoomed in a bit. Let me just get it to something like this. And at the very end, this is something that most people oversee, which is the aspect ratio. Usually I go with something like 16:9, since that's like the default for most smartphones and monitors and that kind of stuff, or maybe 1:1, whatever it is. You can set all of that in here, and as soon as you hit OK, you've got your new camera view. And if you by mistake got out of your camera view, so you're like in your isometric view or something, you can easily come back to it from over here. You've got your cameras listed here, or from the list over here on the right, on the left, you can also come over here and just hit camera view. So going to switch to your camera view. Anyway, so I've got my camera and I want to now start using that camera inside of my motion study. And there's some quick note over here. If you start your motion study in the camera view that you want, so I'm gonna go back again to the first camera, and then I'm going to come over here and right click and create a new motion study. So now it already started inside of this camera view, as you can see. But on the other hand, if I started my model like that, and I'm out of the camera view, and then I created a new motion study, right click, create new motion study, I'm not in the camera view. And if I'm in this case, which is probably most of us, we deal with this because we're not modeling or we're not designing while in the camera view, it's easily, it's very easy to switch. All you have to do is just come over here to orientation and camera views. And this is the key point that's responsible for your view, right? If you just right click on it and hit camera view over here, now you can choose the camera. In this case, I'm going to choose camera 1, and just like that, I'm now in the first camera view. And since a camera also has parameters to be changed, it also has key points that correspond to those parameters. So let's say, for example, I don't want it to start from this view. Let me just edit the properties and let's say change where it looks at my model from. So maybe come over here, change this to something like that. Okay, this key point is now updated. Let's say I come after 4 seconds and I do the same thing. I'm just going to edit the properties of the camera. And since these properties are saved to that key point that I'm creating, all that software has to do now is just do an interpolation between one key point to another. So I've also got my change bar over here. And if I play the animation, it starts moving from one to the other. So now we can see how we can change from one key point to the other, but I don't see where I can control the interpolation, right? Because it just seems that it's using just the default, which is linear. So if I right click on any of these key points, I get this interpolation mode over here. And now you see you've got linear, you've got snap, you've got ease in, ease out. Ease in and ease out, this is like the smoothest thing ever. So as I said, it starts slow, speeds up, and then ends a bit slow as well. So let's say I take this first position and I paste it at the very end as well. So to create like a looping animation. And if I get over here, I can actually tell it that I don't want it to be the normal playback. I actually want it to loop inside of the software over here. And I'm going to hit play. And as you can see, it goes a bit way smoother than before. So you don't have any sudden jolts and any sudden movement over here. So I can also do the same thing to this key point at the very end. I can also set this to ease in and ease out. So both of these will be easing in. And as you can see, it's way smoother than before, where you had this sudden change from one key point to the other. And it's so seamless that you don't even see where it starts or where it ends. So if I hit this timeline, you're not actually going to notice where it starts or where it ends, because it actually does like a perfect loop. And that's one of the best mesmerizing things that you can do inside of animation. So that was with camera views, and now let's talk about appearances, because we can also save those inside of a key point. and start building based on that. So let me just turn off real view graphics real quick. So I've got this model, and it's got some internal details that I want to show, but from this point, I can't see those very well. So I've got this motion study over here, where all these pink change bars that you can see over here, these are just hiding components and changing their appearances and so on. So let me just play it real quick. So you know what, let me just collapse this one first, so I get a better view. So now what's happening is that I'm changing the transparency of these red pins, and then I'm going to change the transparency of the top half. And as you can see, that also can be animated. And at the very end, I just get the transparency of everything back again. And that's not actually the limit. So let's see, you know, this spot down here, I don't like it in blue. Let's say I want to show it to a manufacturer in a different color. All I have to do is just right click, change the appearance. Let's make it something like maybe green. So from the appearance, I'm just going to choose green. Just like that here, okay. And I also got another change bar, as you can see over here. So let's say maybe change to this point, and then I wanted to get back to blue as before. I don't have to do that again. I can use these key points and start copying and pasting just like that. And now when I had it to play from the start, it starts changing from blue to green very, very slowly throughout those like 8 seconds or 7.5 seconds that I set, and then go back again to blue really quickly. So just like that, I can start animating not just my movement in the models that I've got, but also the way I look at it using animation, using camera views, and also the way the model themselves look using appearances or hiding and showing components, as I just showed. So that's the first way of doing animation inside of SolidWorks, where everything is based on key points. But sometimes you don't want that. You just want to give the software some parameters and just let it go. And this is where motors come in. So let's say we're going to start using a linear motor, which is like movement in a singular direction. So in this case, I've got this spring that's set inside of SolidWorks, and it's attached to this, which is attached to a point. And long story short, when this moves downwards, something like that, let me just hit rebuild. The spring also the pointer to the other part, and so on. So I want to animate this inside of SolidWorks. And of course, I can do this with mates, and I can do this with basic dragging. But let's start talking about different ways we can do that. So for example, let me just start by creating the new motion study. The easiest thing to do here is to use a motor, because this is a perfect example for that, movement in a linear direction. So I'm just going to go over here to my motor property manager. It shows on the right left over here, and instead of a rotary motor, I'm starting with a linear motor. And now I just have to decide where I want that motor to be. So I've got these options here. So the component direction, so in this case, I'm going to choose this one. And I see this red arrow pointing upwards. No, I want it to be pointing downwards. Over here, I set what it's going to move relative to. So I want it to move relative to the enclosure itself. And over here, I set the speed. So I mean, setting it to a speed or a velocity, it might not be the best case. But if I hit this drop-down menu, I get different options. So for example, distance or oscillation or segments and data points, expressions, all different ways of defining the parameters of the motor. So for example, I say distance, and I know that the distance that it has to travel is like 31.6 millimeters. So I'm just going to hit that. I don't even know what speed it's going to do. I want that to happen in 2 seconds, and hit okay. So if I were to use speed, I just have to do some calculations and divide that by divide the distance by the time and do that myself. On the other hand, just like that, I have this linear motor over here. I can now shorten the length of my timeline to only 2 seconds, because I'm only using a motor for 2 seconds. And now when I hit calculate, it's going to take a bit of a while, because it has to rebuild and create the new values for the spring as it goes. But as you can see, now it moved all the way down, and I've got the animation I want. So let's say I want this to move back again to the top. I can't change the motor. So let's say I, like over here, after 2 seconds, I turn this motor off, and then I create another motor that moves it up. And yeah, that may work, but there's an easier way. So let me just get this on once again, or maybe even delete this. And let me just edit this motor and make use of another feature over here, which is instead of setting the values by distance, I'm going to set it by oscillation. So as you know, oscillation, it goes back and forth, it goes to and fro, right? So that's exactly what I want over here. So the distance is the same distance it was going to move before. And now when it comes to frequency, frequency is 1 over the period or the time, right? So let's say I wanted to do one whole movement. So it goes down in 2 seconds and up in 2 seconds. That's 4 seconds. So I don't even have to do the math in my head. I can type 1 over 4 and the software calculates it for me and hit OK. And now when I hit calculate, let me just get this only to 4 seconds like that and just hit calculate. And now what I should see is that it should start moving down in 2 seconds and up in 2 seconds. And all I had to do is just set the time, set the distance, and let the software calculate that for me. So it might seem a bit sluggish while it's calculating because it's still doing the computation in the background. But as soon as it finishes and you start playing the animation, it should start playing smoothly. So let me play it right now. It's a bit smoother than before. And you can actually increase the smoothness of that even more by going over here to the options or the settings of the motion study. And from here, you can change the frames per second. So this is the frames per second of the calculation, not the exported video. These are two different things. So instead of calculating 8 frames per second and just moving from one frame to another by interpolation, I can tell it, no, I want it to calculate like 24 frames per second or maybe 30 frames per second. But note that that means it's going to take a bit longer to calculate. And just for the sake of this presentation, I'm not going to do it live. But you know that this option is there. And if I do hit calculate now, it's going to end up taking a bit longer, but it's going to give me more precise intervals between each movement and the next. So that was a use of a rotary motor. Now let's take a look at, sorry, that was a linear motor. Let's take a look at a rotary motor. And I'm actually going to use the same example I showed at the very beginning of the session. So this like triple transmission over here. And by the way, using animations, you don't have to do that much preparation beforehand. So the way this actually was created is that I've got this output shaft over here, and then I've got these sub-assemblies, which include each part of these 3 parts over here, because these 3 are pretty much the same. So all I had to do is just right-click, set it to be a flexible sub-assembly, all right? So which means that parts inside that sub-assembly can move freely, and that's it. All I have to do now is just create my new motion study and add a new motor, but this time it's going to be a rotary motor. And I'm going to do the same thing, just define an axis. In this case, there is nothing it's going to move relative to, since this is just in free space. But if I had something like an enclosure, perhaps, or something like that, I would choose that. And now for the speed, I can do the same thing, whether I want to set it to like an angle to rotate with or something like that. Or let me just do it in RPM for the sake of this. So 60 RPM, that's like 1 rotation per second. So if I like divide that by 2, so like 30, that means like 1 rotation per 2 seconds. That's the way I like think of it. If I divide it by 2 once again, that's like 1 rotation every 4 seconds. So now I know that if I do it and end my animation at only 4 seconds and hit calculate, now it's going to do 1 full rotation in those 4 seconds. And I know now that it's going to end exactly where it started before. So let me play that once again. And I already ended up with a looping animation inside of the software. So all I have to do is just like set the playback to loop and just hit play, and it's going to keep going on and on and on and on. And this is one of the best ways to make an eye-catching animation, in my opinion. So as you saw, I can just set the speed using like a value. But there's actually different ways, as I said. We actually went through some of them. So we talked about distance oscillation, segments, data points, and expressions. These are a bit more advanced because let me just show you real quick. So when I click segments, it gets me this graph over here where I enter different values for, let's say, displacement versus time. So I say, so it starts at 0, and then after 1 second, I want it to go like 180 degrees. And then this one from 0 to 180 degrees, this interpolation, I want it to be based on a cubic formula or a quarter sign or like a polynomial or quadratic or linear. I've got all these different things. So let's say quadratic, for example. And then you've got these curves over here showing you the displacement versus time and velocity and acceleration and jerk. And now you can get a bit more into details where you can have way more control over how your motors start moving around. And you can do the same thing with data points. So now you just enter like at this time interval, I want it to be at this value. At this time, I want it to be at this value. Or expressions where you actually enter an equation. So for example, I can enter here like a sine equation, right? I can say that I want it to be like sine the time, and all it has to do now is just run that for me. So it got here like, here is the sine. There it is. And from here, I've got the variables, I've got the time. So I can also set it to be like sine the time. And as time goes on, it just goes and does that oscillation for me. I can say like 5 times the sine of time, sine times 5 the time, whatever it is, just to change the amplitude and the phase of it. But this is a bit more advanced, so I'm not gonna delve that much into it. But remember, this is like, this functionality does exist inside of SolidWorks. So if you're interested in doing like precise control based on not just constant speed, but changing or varying the speed as time goes by, that's definitely supported. So that should be it regarding animations, right? We said that there's key points and motors. What about this animation wizard we've got over here on the right? So the name might be a bit misleading, because when I say animation wizard, you think, ooh, something that's going to, like an AI thing that's going to create an animation for you. It pretty much does do some of that. It's not based on AI, don't worry. But yeah, it does save some time for you. And it's like gathering some steps, all packaging in one package for you to use. And let's start by seeing the rotation aspect of it. So usually you've got your model and you want to do like a turntable animation of it, where you like do a 360-degree revolution around it. And the easiest way to do this is with Animation Wizard. Let me just get my stopwatch real quick to do it. So here's my stopwatch. Yeah, this is it. Okay, let me just get it a bit smaller. Maybe something like that. All right, and let's see. I'm not even going to do that. I'm going to get back. So I'm even going to create a new motion study, and let's see how quickly can I create the turntable animation. As you can see, 1, 2, 3. Let's go. So I'm running a bit slow over here already. So rotate model counterclockwise. Let's say 5 seconds. Finish, and I'm done. In 8.88 seconds, I've got the animation. You don't believe me? Let's play it from the beginning. There it is. I mean, you wanted a quick animation. I got you a quick animation, right? So that's the thing. The animation wizard is just a way of creating a couple of quick and dirty animations real quick. And the reason here is, let me just turn on real view once again and turn on shadows. And this is going to emphasize what the issue here is. I mean, let me just change the background to white as well. And just keep an eye on this y-axis over here. Remember, I set this to rotate around the y-axis. I'm gonna hit play, and even that y-axis that I asked the software to rotate about, it's also rotating. And what's happening over here with the shadow? Let me just see that once again. The shadow is like, I'm looking at the model from up and down, from different like it's not consistent, right? But it's quick, right? I did it in 8 seconds, in under 10 seconds. So that's what you get with the animation wizard. So let me just delete all of that and just explain what I did. So over here, this is the animation wizard, and it's got a couple of different things that you can go through. So the first, or the easy thing, which most people do when they create an animation, is rotation. So I just hit next. Which axis do you want to rotate about? I'm gonna hit y-axis, number of rotations, the direction, so whether it's clockwise, counterclockwise. It's all pretty simple. And then you set the duration, so how long should it take to do one full rotation? Let's keep it at 10. And then when should it start? So I want it to start from the very beginning. Let's leave 1 second at the very beginning. So I want it to wait for 1 second and then do the animation. And as you can see, it waited for 1 second and then did that. And what you see over here is a number of key points that the software created for me. And these key points are, as you can see over here, it's in the orientation camera view key points. So that means that over here, there's this orientation. Over here, there's a different orientation. And all the software does is just does interpolation between those key points. So since these are key points, I can actually start moving them around if I want to. Maybe change the interpolation mode of some of them. Let's make this ease in, for example, and so on. And I've got full control over it, right? But that also comes with some negative sides, because let's say, for example, instead of doing this in 10 seconds, now I want to change something in my animation. I want it to do the rotation in only 5 seconds. I can do that by just like dragging these one by my hand and just starting changing the time intervals between each one and the other. But that's just like time consuming. So how about this? How about I just delete this myself by hand and then create a new one? And that might also not be that effective. So let's come back over here and use this option to delete all existing paths, right? Before I try this out, let me just do something real quick. Let's say I want to come over here at 6 seconds and hide a couple of components. Let's say these components, I want these to be hidden. Yeah, that's a reasonable request, right? So throughout the animation, some things will happen and I will have that rotation, right? So now let's go back again and change that, delete all existing paths from I'm going to keep everything the same from 10 seconds down to 5 and hit finish. And yeah, it deleted everything. So when it says delete all existing paths, it doesn't just delete everything in the orientation and camera views. It deletes everything in your timeline. So one might say, okay, I'm going to hit undo. And instead of doing that, I'm just going to keep it as it is. So I'm not going to choose delete all existing paths, and I'm going to go ahead and do it in 5 seconds. And that might sound like a good idea until you find that it just adds those key points on top of what you already had. So now you have something like this, which is like a total mess, and you have to create your animation again. So this is my issue with the animation wizard. It is quick and it is dirty, but it doesn't get you good results. So on the other hand, there's another way to create your turntable animation. It will take a bit more time. So as you can see over here, I've got this sketch that I've created. Let me just zoom out a bit. So I've got this circle that I created on a plane a bit on top. And all I'm going to do right now is just come over here and create a new camera. Right. And remember when we were talking about cameras, I had this numeric control where I could easily like set the position of the camera and where the camera is looking at. I don't actually have to do that. I can now set the target by selection. Let's say the origin. So here's the origin and the position of the camera on this circle that I created. The origin sounds a bit too low. So let me just raise it a bit. Maybe something like that. Yep, that looks better. So that's centered in my screen. And now, since I based the camera position on a path in general, whether it's like a line, a squiggle, a spline, or an arc, whatever it is, I get this slider where I can start changing where the camera is along that path. So all I have to do now is just set it to 0, hit OK, create a new motion study, and then come after 5 seconds over here, open this, change the properties, and all I have to do right now is just drag that slider all the way to the other side. So from 0 all the way to 100, hit OK, and I'm done. Yeah, maybe it took me like 10 more seconds to set everything up, but when I hit play from the beginning, now when you look at the y-axis, it does actually rotate about it, and the shadows then make sense, and everything looks good. And not just that, let's say I don't want it to be 5 seconds, I want it to be 10 seconds. Just drag this all the way to 10 seconds, yeah, and it's done. Now let's play again. Everything's perfect. So that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Taking just a couple of more minutes or maybe even hours, let's say, but it's never going to reach that long, of course, to just tweak a bit about your animation and get a drastically different result at the very end. And for example, here are both of them side by side. And I'm just going to leave you guys to be the judge over here. Tell me which one do you think is worth saving your time and doing it quick and dirty on the right, on the left, or taking some more time to create a plane and create a sketch and a path, a circle, and a camera, and then just change the slider inside of SolidWorks. So you guys be judge over here. Anyways, that's the first thing. The second thing that animation wizard can do, and this one actually is pretty neat. So yeah, I know I was like taking it pretty harsh on the animation wizard before, but when it comes to exploded views, this one is pretty neat. So I'm gonna use the same thing because here in this model, let me just go back over here. When I go to the configuration manager, I see that I've actually got an exploded view set up already. So based on that, I can actually import the exploded view inside of my animation. Someone might say, yeah, well, I can right click, hit on animate, and from here I've got this button to save. So when I pause, I've got the save button, right? Well, this only saves this part, which is either the explosion or the collapse of your animation, of your part. But let's say I want to integrate that inside of an existing animation. So that's the thing I'm talking about. So let me just collapse this once again, create a new motion study. And you know what? Let's not create a new motion study. Let's go back to that one where we had the camera rotating around. And now let's use the animation wizard once again, but this time I want to set it to explode. Next, and here the duration is like the overall duration of everything. Okay, let's say it's 10 seconds, start from the beginning and finish. And let me just take a look over here. And as you can see, it created all of these key points for me, changing the position of all the components at once. So if I hit play, now I'm doing something that I was not able to do before, which is building up one by one, step by step, adding more and more parts to my animation. And let's not just end it over here. So let's say, okay, I'm gonna come over here and add another collapse at the very end. As I said, I like making my animations looping. And let's start at, let's say 11, for example. There it is. So it waited for 1 second and then went back again. And for the camera, I can do the same thing. So I want the camera to wait for 1 second and then come back again. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it all the way at the end. And just like that, I created this nice symmetric animation that goes on and on. And I can also start doing different things. So as I said, if I want to hide a couple of components, yeah, well, go ahead. If you want to change the appearance of something, well, no one's stopping you. And just like that, you've created something that you would not able to do before, just using one type of your animation techniques. So these different ways, they were all things that we've already kind of used before. So yeah, we know how to create mates, we know how to maybe create cameras, change appearances, add motors, that kind of stuff. That's okay. But sometimes some things that are implemented inside of SolidWorks and not that much hype is created around them. And mate controller is one of those. So mate controller, if in case you don't know, it was introduced back in SolidWorks 2016, I believe. So that's like what, 8 years ago. And I've got this nice model to demonstrate it with, because in this model, let me just turn everything off. I've got lots of mates that I want to control at the same time. So let's use the mate controller, right? So all I have to do is just come over here to insert, and I've got this mate controller. And all it does is that it's got a couple of supported mates, some types of mates that it supports, doesn't support everything. And for those supported mates, it just gathers them all in one place for you to start changing them like in a batch process. So let's take a look at this. All I have to do now is just collect all supported mates. So I'm just going to click on this button. And you know, these mates, they don't actually look like the names of mates, but that's because I just renamed them. So these are actually all limit angle mates, but I just renamed them to seat 1 all the way to 16. So I've got 16 of these seats over here. And I want to start animating them, moving up and down one by one, but like as I said, in a batch process. So I've got all of these set over here, and I've got this first position, which I'm in right now. So now let's create another position. All I have to do is just click on this robot arm thingy, position 2, okay. And now just start changing. And here I've got this slider I can change with. I've got numeric values. So let's say I want everything to be like 45 degrees. Really quickly, I can just start entering the values and end up with this. But remember on the 5th of September, this isn't the 5th of September. Anyways, we have to hit update position. I've done this way too many to remember, because you just do tons of changes, and then you go ahead and change the position to another one without hitting update, and you lose everything. So remember to hit update. And now let's say I want to create a new position 3, maybe get this up, get this like that, and you can do anything you want. So as you can see, I've got full control over all of these. I can start changing them, as I said, in a batch way. So I'm not using one by one, editing each mate on its own. Hit update. And let's say I want to go back again to the first position. So the thing is, when I create a new position, it actually duplicates the existing position and puts that new one at the very end. So if I stop and go all the way to the very first one and hit create new one, as you see, this is number 4, hit OK. What I did is that I duplicated the first one and send it all the way to the very end. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is this, 2 is where everything is like 45 degrees, 3 is like the mess I created, and 4, everything came back. Just like that. I didn't even have to get myself every value all the way back to its original position. And remember, you can easily delete any position you want. You can like change the order. So let's say I want 4 to come before 3, or 2 to be before 1, anything. I can change that all in here. Okay. And if I scroll a bit down at the very end, I've got this duration. And remember, you have to pay attention to this, because we're going to see a bit in a moment that this duration is the only way you can set the differences in time for your animation. So when it comes to the movement from one position to another, let's say I want everything to be like 1 second, maybe this 1 second as well, and this is also 1 second. So everything is totals to 3 seconds. Just as in exploded views and collapsed views, I can save the animation directly from here. But if I want this to be integrated inside of my existing motion study, I'm going to just hit OK. And if I scroll down, I've got this mate control over here. So mate control, this one was already existing. So let me just rename the one we just created to NYC. So this is the one we created now. All I have to do now is just create a new motion study, go to the animation wizard. And now, since I've created a mate controller, this option is now activated for me. So if I hit next, I'm going to go to mate controller NYC, and I can import it in different ways. I can put it as key points, which is what we're going to do right now, or as motors, but it tells you that this is recommended for motion analysis. So since we're now talking about animation, we're not really going to delve into that. And as you can see, this is grayed out. I don't have control over the duration. That's because back when I was creating the mate controller itself, I set the duration of every step. So that's why everything is set over there, and it just transfers into here. All I have to set is when does it start. So let's say after 2 seconds, for example, and hit finish. And you might not see anything happening over here, but remember, this is a mate controller. So if I go all the way down to the mate folder and open that, now I see all these changes happening over here. These are all changes in the values, remember. So if I had to do this by hand, it would take me like ages. So I had to stop at the value and double click on the angle, and then wait for the box to appear, and then enter the value myself and hit OK, and wait for it to be rebuild, and then go to another one. So it just takes way longer. But now all I have to do is just hit play, and it transferred everything from the mate controller all the way over here to me. And you can actually take this to the next level. So I've created this animation before. Let me just show it to you real quick. So like these are like armrests where you can get them down and use them as armrests, or do this like wave motion inside of SolidWorks as well. This was gonna take me like hours, literally hours of changing the dimensions and setting values by hand one by one, if not for the mate controller and the ability to get all of that in here. So I know I was pretty harsh on the animation wizard at the beginning, but it does have some pretty nice uses to it. So when it comes to the animation wizard in the mate controller, as I said, there are some types of mates that it supports and some types that it doesn't. So here I've listed the types of mates that it does support. So you've got the angle mate, the limited angle mate, the distance and the limit distance, and you've got the width, the slot, and the path mate. But remember, for those last 3, you have to have some type of numeric control. So if you set it to be like free, you don't have any control over that. Maybe by dragging using the cursor, but not using mate controller. So you have to set, let's say, your slot mate to be at a certain distance or certain percentage along the way in order to be able to control that numerically using the mate controller. So that's pretty much it when it comes to animations, right? As you can see, it's not really that hard. It just builds up one step on the other, and one by one you start taking your animations to the next level. Now let's talk about basic motion. This is where the physics comes into play, because now it just opens way new possibilities that were just simply not possible to create when you're using animations. And as I said, that's because it's based on physics, so contact, you've got gravity, stuff like that. And let's start with the with contact. So that's like the simplest thing ever, which is when two things collide together. We all know that inside of SolidWorks, the software is not going to tell you, hey, you've got two intersecting bodies over here, unless you actually go and do some collision detection or interference detection and stuff like that. But in general, the software does allow some overlapping between solid bodies, and we might actually do use that for our own favor some cases. But when it comes to animation, I actually do want this to represent real life things, right? But in real life, there is no such thing as two objects like hitting each other and just going through each other. So this is where contact comes into play. So I've got this this model over here. SolidWorks are just acting up. Yeah, just like that. Let me just open it once again. So here I've got this this simulator where when you rotate the handle, it's supposed to simulate two different types of waves. You've got like transverse waves and longitudinal waves represented by these dots. And yeah, I do actually have the ability to recreate this using animation. Let's say I add some like cam mates or tangent mates between these and each other. But no, I do actually want to do this the right way using physics. All right. So I'm going to create a new motion study. And now we talked about how to add a motor and use the animation wizard. But when it comes to over here, we've got now the contacts and that kind of stuff. So now let's end contacts between these parts and each other. And the first thing is, if you've missed that, let me just show it once again. I'm going to hit contact, and then I get this message over here. It tells me that I'm using the animation. So here's where I change the type of the motion study. This drop-down menu shows me animation or basic motion. And if you've got SolidWorks Premium and you've activated the add-in for motion analysis, you also get motion analysis. So remember, when it tells you to change it, that means that whatever you add, it's not going to be activated. It's not going to take part into your motion study unless you activate the right motion study type. So here I've got basic motion, and now I can start adding contacts. So here I've got three things to note. One, use of contact groups, and remember that because we're going to get back to it in a moment. Here is where you add the bodies that you want to the software to calculate contact between. And here you've got the number of contact pairs, which is how many pairs of contacts that the software has to calculate for you. And that just determines how long it's going to take to calculate the movement for you. So for me, I'm just going to ease it for myself and just select all these circles with all these rods. And I already have mates in place for these rods and the frame itself and stuff like that. So I'm just going to simplify it for myself. But I already have like 561 contact pairs to be calculated. Let me just say okay. And since this model was set with mates, so I've got some tangent mates that I had before, and all I have to do is just suppress them, and just like that, they will have no effect whatsoever inside of my animation right now, basic motion. So I've already added my contacts. All I have to do now is just add the motor to rotate that handle. So I'm just going to add the motor as usual. Let me just get that axle over here. Select that one. And for the direction, like that, what to rotate about the frame itself. For the speed, let's say something like I don't want it to be too long, and I also don't want it to be too quick, so maybe 15. So that's going to take 15 RPM. That's like 4 seconds for one rotation, and let's end the timeline for ourselves at 4 seconds by dragging this one over here. And all I have to do right now is just hit calculate and sit back and watch it do wonders for me. So now it's going to take a bit of time to calculate the contacts between each components and each other, especially those ones that I've set it to calculate between. And remember, that's like 561, so that's not a small number. But what's going on the screen? Okay, so we've got an issue over here. It seems that there is contact, and that's a good thing. But for some reason, when it goes to the end, everything that's pushed up, it just doesn't go down. It defies gravity in some way. So what we need now is gravity. And gravity is also something that's only for physics, right? You don't have gravity inside of virtual environments. So we can now add gravity from over here inside of basic motion, something else that is not available in animation. And remember that you've got this green arrow over here. If it's not that visible, let me just change the color of the background, or maybe turn off the camera view and change the color of the background to something a bit white. So now, if I go back again and add this, you're gonna see this green arrow over here. That is where the direction of gravity is. So right now it's going like in the Z direction. Since this is software, I can tell it to go anywhere. Well, if I even want to go like up, why not? It's software, right? But for the sake of like realism, I'm gonna tell it to go Y direction, and I can also flip the direction if it's not correct, so it goes downwards. And from here, I can also change the G, the gravity acceleration. So here, this is the default for Earth. If you want to simulate it for Moon or for Saturn or for Mars or whatever, you can also change that value over here. And I'm just gonna hit OK. But I'm not sure that this is the best view. So I'm going to go back again and just turn on the camera view once again. There it is. And now that I've got gravity and I've got contacts and I've got the motor, all I have to do is just recalculate. And now it's going to take gravity into consideration. When something is pushed up, if the force pushing it up is no longer there, then it's going to fall down again by the effect of gravity. And that's actually what we want over here. And it actually looks very promising. As I said, it's a bit slow because it's still calculating it. Plus, when it comes over here to the frames per second, remember now I'm in basic motion, so I'm not talking about the frames per second for animation. No, I'm talking about the frames per second for basic motion. And I also have this geometry accuracy and contact resolution, which these sliders, I can change them to a bit higher for more precise contact. But that also, as I said before, it comes at the cost of time. So let me just leave it as it is and set this to loop and hit play. And yeah, it actually does look pretty good and pretty convincing, right? You've got the handle moving and everything is moving as expected, right? But the issue is it took me quite some time to reach that. Even if I already knew in my mind that I'm going to have to use contacts and gravity and all of that, it took some time to calculate because, as I said, 561 to calculate. So let me just change that contact, edit that feature. And remember contact groups? Yeah, now it's time to use them. So let me just clear all of that and use contact groups. And now I see this message, contact between items in the same group is ignored. And that's actually pretty powerful. Now I've got these two groups where if everything is in one group, there is no calculation between those group members and each other. But group members and the other members of the other group, yeah, there is calculation between those two. So this is the thing. So I know that these rods will never collide with each other, or these disks, they will also never collide with each other. So there is no need to tell the software, hey, expect there is some sort of collision that may happen between them. No, don't expect that. So I'm just gonna come over here and select all the circles. And I'm going to go to the other group and select all the rods. And just like that, I've cut the number of contact pairs by like a massive amount. So now it's only 289. That's like what, 50% of what we had before. So now when I hit OK and hit recalculate, so if I hit play, it's just going to play what I already had previously calculated, like as if I didn't hit rebuild in terms of modeling. So now let's recalculate from scratch. As you can see, it's already moving, it's already going way faster than before because it's got way less calculations to do and way less computation to do in the background as well. And just like that, there it is. You've got the animation, it's up and running, and everything is working. So I just want to note something here. Let me just close that. That's that when it comes to contact, as I said, it does simulate something like physical, right? But the thing is, changing the grouping, it doesn't actually change the result. It only changes the solving time. So both these are side by side, they're identical. All right. I couldn't find any difference in terms of both exported videos that you see over here. But when I compare between using basic motion and using animation, now I do see some sort of difference. So the one on the right, that's actually like a bit of cheating because I've got like smooth, buttery smooth motion. That's because there is no physics, there is no friction, there's nothing. There's just a couple of mates, a couple of movements that has to be calculated, and that's it. So here's the trade-off. If you want something that's super smooth and not realistic, then go with animation. If you want something that is more realistic, more it describes what you will find in real life, where there's friction between components, there's some sort of interaction between each component and the other, then in that case you have to do sort of physics, dynamics, calculations. And this is basic motion. When we're talking about motion analysis, that takes it to the next level, where you can specify the type of friction and the coefficient of friction between each two components and each other, and it just keeps going on and on down the rabbit hole to get more realistic results from your motion studies. So that's for context. As for gravity, remember the direction. I've used it a long time and always, why is my components flying everywhere? Well, because your gravity direction is set incorrectly. So that's something that you must make sure of. And something else, well, gravity, it actually, like there's a precedence for which force to apply first. So when it comes to gravity or a motor, no, the motor is calculated first. And it's like one step higher over gravity. So let's say gravity pulls you down and there's a motor that's pushing you up, the component will go up. It's not going to fall under the effect of gravity because you did add an external force that's starting to move it in one direction. And the last thing is, you can actually add multiple contacts in your animation. So if I got like 3 components, I can add one contact between the first 2 and another contact between the second 2, for example. But when it comes to gravity, there's only one gravity. So don't ever think that you can say, I want something to pull it from the left and something to pull it from the right. SolidWorks doesn't support that. It's only one gravity in your motion study. All right. So that's basic motion in a nutshell. But one might say, well, is that just it? I mean, yeah, I can do some of that using animation. So where's the wow factor? Well, take a look at this. These are things that you could simply not do using animation. Unless you're into like moving every component by hand, you still won't be able to do it like that, because this here is realistic. This here is a simulation of what we will get if you did actually recreate this in real life without actually taking into consideration physics and air friction and that kind of stuff. So what you see over here are just a small example of what you can get using basic motion that you just simply cannot get with animation. And this is where we should take a moment to stop and think, okay, now I want to create a motion study for my X project, whatever it is. What I'm going to do? Well, it comes down to what type of animation or what type of motion study are you after? Is it something that's based on physics? Okay, so you can still mimic it with animation. You can't mimic it with animation, maybe because there's something that's a bit more realistic in a way that you must have the software tell you without you actually inputting the values for it. Then in that case, you must use basic motion. There is no workarounds for it. On the other hand, if you're just trying to like do a quick and dirty animation of showing different views of your model and maybe moving around, hiding stuff and showing stuff, then animation is the answer for you. All right. And that's all good, right? You've created everything. You've created this animation or the basic motion. The motion study in general is created and everything is perfect. Everything is pristine. And now I want to show it. Because it doesn't make any sense that to show that to you. I have to show you inside of SolidWorks as I've been doing for the last couple of minutes. So now let's talk about exporting. And when it comes to exporting, there are a couple of things that you must take into consideration. First things, as you saw in the spring model that I showed a bit earlier, and in these two models, the ratchet and the pole on the screen right now, when it comes to model that includes something that's changing the geometry, that's actually really computationally intensive, because it actually rebuilds the model on every single frame, like a rebuild for every single frame, just to calculate the new geometry. So unless you really do need external references and that kind of stuff, where the model might actually be like prone to different changes to its geometry throughout the animation. If you don't need that, then try to like lock the external references and stuff like that, just to make sure that you have the calculation as quickly as possible. On the other hand, if you do need that, then animation is the answer for you, because basic motion and motion analysis do not support that for you. All right, and something else. I know that PhotoView 360 is already discontinued in SolidWorks 2024, but if you're using an older version of SolidWorks 2023 or anything older, and you do have PhotoView 360, which is like the built-in renderer inside of SolidWorks, so it also doesn't support changing geometry kind of animations. So it can render any animation just fine, but if there's any geometry that's changing throughout the animation, it's just going to render the still shape of it at the very first of the animation, and the same thing will happen throughout the whole animation. No changes will happen whatsoever. Your only chance to get changing geometry is if you render with the SolidWorks screen as your renderer. All right. Other things to take into consideration. You don't actually have to save your animation as a video. And I'm now talking about animation as like in general term. As I said, it's a loose term. I mean, animation or basic motion or motion analysis, like motion studies in general. It doesn't have to be a video. You can actually save it as images. And that actually is pretty handy and pretty useful most of the time. Let's say you want a thumbnail of a video or something like that. You can save a specific frame as an image and call it a day. And we're going to see how to do that in a moment. Something else to consider, two things actually: FPS and resolution, frames per second and resolution. These two factors are the main thing that you must take into consideration before starting to do the exporting process, because these are what's going to define how good or how bad your animation is going to look like. And the final thing is video compression. So when it comes to video compression, I'm talking about the amount of compression or the amount of decoding and encoding that happens in the background to make the file size a bit smaller and save you some time, but it, of course, takes a bit more time to export the video itself. So that's also something that you might take into consideration. So let's see that in real life. Here I've got three videos side by side, or three portions of the same video, actually. And these are all created inside of SolidWorks, all exported from SolidWorks, but in different formats, right? The one on the very right, that's an MP4 file. The one in the very left, that's an uncompressed AVI file. And the one in the middle, that's a fully compressed AVI file. So let me just hit play and be amazed. And remember, this isn't like Zoom glitching out or my screen stuttering or anything. No. What you're seeing, these artifacts, that is what you get from SolidWorks when you export like a fully compressed AVI. And the buttery smooth animation you get on the left and the right in the MP4 and the uncompressed AVI, that's also what you get from the software. So that's the difference that video compression can do, and choosing the right or wrong format can change drastically with the results you get. So this is all the same process. I created the same steps inside of my motion study, but just when I'm exporting it, different parameters or different values for certain things can drastically change what your model looks like. So let's see this together inside of SolidWorks. Okay, so here we are. We've got this this cool model over here, and here's my animation. I've already created it, and all I want to do is just export it from 2 seconds to the very end. I don't want to export the whole thing. Okay, so I'm just gonna go over here for the save animation button and hit it, and now I've got some options. So first things first, the file name, that's obvious. The save as type. So all of these at the very the first 3 or 4 options, these are all video formats. When it says series of, that's images. So series of BMPs, JPEGs, PNGs, and so on. These are all like exporting every single frame as a single image on its own. All right, and that's actually pretty useful, as I said, especially when it comes to PNGs. Because let me just cancel this real quick. and go to SolidWorks options, and I'm going to go to the export options. And this is something, if you don't know, then it's pretty handy, and it does really do wonders, especially when you like making a presentation or something and you want some high quality images of your model. If you go over here to export and you go all the way to PNG over here, you can have this option to remove background. If you check this on and you export your animation in a PNG, a series of PNGs, it actually removes the background for every single frame. And that's like a massive time saver, and it just does wonders when it comes to, you know what, let me just show it to you. I'm gonna hit OK, and I'm going to go over here, save the animation. And instead of saving it as a video, I'm going to save it as a series of PNGs. Remember, only PNGs of these support transparency. Bitmaps, JPEGs, they don't support transparency at all. Here is the first thing I was talking about, which is resolution. So here it's tied to the aspect ratio, which is the width and the length of your animation. Since I'm using a camera view, as you can see over here, so it's using the aspect ratio of the camera, but I can easily change that to something else. Let's say 16:9. As you can see, it changes in the background over there. And now when I change this, let's say 1920 by 1080, which is full HD, the frames per second, please, I don't know why the default is 7.5, but just never use that default. All right, make it 24, make it 25. You know, some people use 29.98. It's okay. 30, 60. Just don't use 7.5. It ends up with a like a slow and crunchy animation that doesn't look good at all. So please just increase it. 30 is like a sweet spot. It's a good balance between smooth animation and not that much details that you don't actually need. And when it comes to frames to output, this is where I'm talking about not having to export the whole thing. Instead of entire animation, I can tell it I want the time range. So from 2 seconds to the end, or maybe even a single frame. So let's see that. Let me just export it to my desktop real quick. There it is, and hit save. Nope. And just like that, if I go to the desktop over here, I've got it. And as you can see, it doesn't have a background. Yeah, of course, when I open it in here, it does have a background, but let's put it over here. There is no background for it. It's a transparent PNG. Okay, so the same thing I can do with any other series of images. So instead of doing like one, I can do like a duration and so on. But the thing I'm talking about right now is compression, right? So I'm talking about AVI and FLV and MKV and MP4. AVI is the default, so let's check that one. Let's say that I want the image size to be only HD. So I don't want it to be that big, and I want it to be 16:9. Like that, and I'm gonna hit save, and it just doesn't save straight away. It tells you first what kind of compression do you want. So here in the compressor, it tells you which engine, which algorithm of compression do you want to use. Different codecs, as you can see, depending on which are installed on your device. These are some of the defaults, and full frames, which is the uncompressed version. This means that there is no compression. What you export from the software is directly saved in a video file, no compression in the middle whatsoever. Or if you can, if you want, you can drag this slider and change the compression quality. Let's say 100%, which is like the highest thing, or 0, which is like no compression at all, and stuff like that. The default, I believe, is like 80, which is like a bit balanced. And as soon as you hit OK, now it goes ahead and starts animating the going through your animation frame by frame and saving it to a video. And if I hit stop right now, it's actually only going to save those couple of like half a second or something. So here it is. If I go over here, it's like like half a second save. So that's also a neat thing. Anyways, so that's when it comes to AVI. But if I'm saving it as an MP4, in this case, as soon as I hit save, just goes ahead and saves. There is no option to change the compression here, because it's like it already does know the balance between file size and compression rate, so it does that for you without even asking you. And let me just stop this real quick, and it just does it for you at the very end. All right, so I'm also comparing these two only because AVI, as I said, is the default, and MP4, it's my personal preference. And as for why that's my personal preference, we have to head over to here. So this is a comparison between all three exported videos of that same animation. So I saved it from like 2 seconds to 6.1 seconds. That's like a 4-second animation. And look at this, uncompressed AVI, 292 megabytes. Megabytes. That's over quarter a gigabyte, all right, for a 4-second animation. And the fully compressed is, well, obviously it's compressed. It's only like 1.5 megabytes, but the quality, as you saw in the previous slide, was like not usable at all. And MP4, well, that's 23 kilobytes. No, not mega, it's kilobytes. We're in another order of magnitude right now. So the quality of the MP4 was pretty much on par with the uncompressed AVI, even though there's like what 209, like what I believe it's like 1,000 times bigger the file size. So that's the thing. When it comes to AVI, you need to take careful care of the compression you're choosing, because it can drastically change what your animation looks like. When it comes to MP4, you just click, 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 and it does everything for you. It just balances the quality with the file size for you. All right, so that brings us to the very end of our session for today. I know it was a bit of a long session, but I really hope that you guys got out of it with something useful. Now it's time for the Q&A. I'm going to go through the chat real quick and see any questions I've got. And just in case you have a question coming up, or if I, for some reason, didn't get to your question right now, this is my LinkedIn. You can simply scan the QR code and DM me on LinkedIn. I've got an open profile, so anyone can send me a message straight away. And yeah, I'm gonna go now and check the chat for any questions. So let's see.
Great. So while questions keep rolling in, I wanted to congratulate you on this. This is a fantastic presentation, so I really appreciate you going through this. I think I've learned a lot in this session, but I have a question. So when you're looking at the spring animation, is there a particular way that you need to create your model in terms of settings? Like, does it have to be like a flexible model or something in order to have that springing action, or how does that look like on the model side?
Yeah, okay, so you know what, I can actually show it on a different model. So it's the same concept, right? Let's show it on this one. All right, so this pull and ratchet, I already have that ready for me. So the thing is, it depends on how you created the model in the first place, right? So let's say that spring was composed of different parts that are assembled together, and they're like in a sub-assembly, as you saw in the triple transmission animation. So you have to set it to a flexible sub-assembly in order to like transfer that movement down into the sub-assembly itself. But sometimes it's the geometry itself is changing, not that the parts are moving. So in this case, there is no need for any sort of flexible. The flexibility comes from the part itself, or how it was created. And as you can see over here, I've got the pole. It's got this arrow over here because I've got an external reference. And that's based on how it was created in the first place. And let me just open it real quick and show you that. So if I open the part itself, you're going to notice that some of the driving features of it are not inside the model. This catch 3